What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. In today's video on this lovely Sunday afternoon, I wanted to get into Tanner Engstrand in a little bit more detail. Here is everything you need to know about the Jets' new offensive coordinator. So you've heard me talk a lot about Tanner Engstrand over the last few weeks, as it was a pretty big rumor that he was going to end up being the Jets' offensive coordinator, and that ended up being the case, made official just a couple of days ago. But I wanted to share some notes with you guys from an article from the Detroit Free Press. So I've been able to do, like in the past, my own, research and like explain why I think he could be a good, offensive coordinator, but the Detroit Free Press went into a little bit more detail on what the role that Tanner Engstrand had with the Detroit Lions. And I just hope that it answers some questions from Jets fans, because I've gotten a ton of questions about the guy. What did he do in Detroit? How do we know how involved he was? All valid questions and all valid concerns about a guy who is going to be a first-time play caller at the NFL level. But again, hopefully this video will help answer some of those questions. So apparently Tanner Engstrand was very involved with the installation phase of game plans week by week. And it was the first voice that Jared Goff would hear, and pretty much the rest of the skill position group on a week-to-week basis when they were installing plays that they were going to use for that game on Sunday. And here is what his role is by, Engstrand himself explained it to the Detroit Free Press, that the game plan process involved putting a tape together of every play on the call sheet up to 120 clips and explaining why coaches thought those plays would work against this week's opponent. So clearly, as we know, Ben Johnson was the mastermind of that Detroit Lions offense. That's why he's the one who got the coaching job in Chicago, and not why Tanner Engstrand got hired. Like, this is not me spinning it and saying, oh, Tanner Engstrand was the most important guy on that offensive staff. Not true. Clearly it was Ben Johnson, but it's not like Tanner Engstrand was just getting a cup of coffee for the guy every day. He was clearly very involved in the communication process with the offensive staff as they're putting together the play sheet and going through and, saying what's going to work. And he was the one explaining to the players from the coach's perspective of why they were going that route and what things they were attacking on opponents' defenses, which gives me some confidence that it could work out with him as an offensive coordinator. Again, nothing in this life is guaranteed, especially with first-timers in any position. We have no idea if Aaron Glenn's going to be a good head coach. We have no idea if Tanner Engstrand's going to be a good offensive coordinator. But I like something that I could list as a positive about Tanner Engstrand is that, clearly he was very involved in one of the league's best offenses. And if Aaron Glenn, trusts him, I think by default, if you're a fan of the Aaron Glenn hire and you're going to trust the process, give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. After Ben Johnson installed the plays in a meeting with the entire offense, what Tanner Engstrand would then do is lead a walkthrough for the Lions skill position. So he was very involved with the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, if you want to toss them in there as well. So it was Johnson who was the one who was deciding which plays to install. But clearly, Engstrand has to have a high level of understanding of what they're doing to explain it to the guys before Ben Johnson goes down there for whatever their walkthrough is. I have a quote as well from Jared Goff on what he had to say about Tanner Engstrand. He said he's doing it only in the quarterback room at the time, but he's great. He was an assistant quarterback coach briefly for me in 2021, so we've been in the room together for a long time. He can do it. He can speak all the languages you want to hear. He can answer all the questions. He can understand where you're coming from and does a great job. So Engstrand, a former player himself, not at the NFL level, but someone who at one point was a collegiate quarterback. So he is able to get it from the player side of things. And that's something you could take away from a lot of the guys on this Jets staff. A lot of them are former players. And sure, that happens a lot around the league. But the Jets, you're hoping that the guys on the current Jets 53-man roster are going to have a different level of respect for someone who's been in their shoes and done it before. And you're hoping that Tanner Engstrand can relate to these guys in either the quarterback room, the wide receiver room, the running back, all throughout the offense, because he's done it and he should be able to answer, any questions that they may have. As for the negative, he hasn't called plays yet in the NFL, but he did at San Diego in college. He did for the DC Defenders in the XFL. He interviewed for an offensive coordinator spot a year ago with the Seahawks and the Patriots. He didn't get it, but he now feels like he's ready to make the jump to a play caller. And following just the natural progression, I'd agree with that. I'm more than confident saying that he is qualified to be an offensive coordinator. We just have no idea what kind of offensive coordinator he's going to be yet. We don't know if it's going to work and be good. We don't know if it's going to be bad. We do know some of his influences, though, not only Ben Johnson, but he's also mentioned John Morton, who ended up getting hired by the Detroit Lions to be the offensive coordinator, as a place of inspiration.
So I think Ben's been in several different backgrounds, and I've been in a couple different ones, and really my initial background, I would say, really is more in a West Coast offense version. Just going back to my first year in coaching in 2005 for Jim Harbaugh, and Johnny Moe, Coach Morton, was our pass game coordinator and receivers coach that year. So being the GA there, just kind of learned, that's where I started with that stuff, and then being in a couple different places, evolving into just iterations of that offense, I would say. And Ben's been, I think, in a handful of them, down in Miami and here, with Coach Bev and all that stuff. So I think it's good to be able to draw from a bunch of different areas, of his experiences, and then I can bring some stuff to the table, and and everybody just kind of puts it, bring it all together. So there's a lot of different experience, I guess you could say, in that way.
Tanner Engstrand likely will run a version of the West Coast offense, which is essentially what most of the NFL is running nowadays, is some version of the West Coast offense, whether you're from the Shanahan tree, McVay, whoever. That's more likely than not where, what these teams are doing. And I've talked about it in videos in the past. I would expect the Jets offense this year to make some major changes. I would think that, for Engstrand in particular, coming from the Detroit Lions, they're going to use a lot more motion, which is something that I've been advocating for the last couple of years. They did it under Mike LaFleur. They really didn't do it under Nate Hackett. This past year, more of an Aaron Rodgers thing, but 2 years ago, I think that was originally their plan for Aaron Rodgers anyway. But then when Rodgers went down, I don't think Nate Hackett really did a good job adjusting for what would benefit Zach Wilson. And the benefit of using motion is to kind of see what the defense is running. Are they in man coverage? Are they in zone coverage? And I'm not going to say it makes it easier. I don't know if that's completely fair, but you are able to see what kind of defense that the defense is in by doing that. And that's why we see some of these teams like the Lions, like the Rams, all these teams run a high percentage of motion. That's the reasoning behind it. You also look at the Lions with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They ran the ball a lot, and they were very successful with it. So I'm hoping that with the new addition of the offensive line coach going away from Keith Carter and going a new direction, poaching from the Detroit Lions there as well, and with Tanner Engstrand, I'm hoping that they run the ball significantly more this year than they did a year ago. They had the fewest rushing attempts in the NFL and the second most pass attempts. I don't think that's the way for the Jets to have the most amount of success on offense. I think they need to lean on Breece Hall a little bit more. I'm very curious to see Tanner Engstrand speak for the first time after getting this New York Jets coaching job as the offensive coordinator. And I would hope that someone asks him about the run game and what he thinks of Breece Hall and all those guys in the running back room. But I'm hoping that, again, one of the changes that we will see from last year and the year before, with Todd Downing and Nathaniel Hackett, is more of an emphasis on the run, more of a West Coast offense, and hopefully more innovation. It was a very stale offense that the Jets were operating last year. And I'm not saying they got to go full, Ben Johnson trick plays 5 times a game, but they need to be a little bit more modern and a little bit more innovative. And I have some confidence that Tanner Engstrand is going to be able to take some of the things that he did in Detroit and implement them here with the New York Jets. So hopefully this deep dive into Tanner Engstrand helps you out and answer some of your questions that you may have had about the hire. I'm Matt O'Leary. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. Leave a like. Hit the bell so you get notified every time I post a video. I appreciate you guys. I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.